Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh, and very good afternoon to all of you. Thank you so much for your watching this video. So this lecture, I'm going to uh, explain how international environment influence foreign policy making. So this is a part of the uh, determining factors behind foreign policy making that I have explained before midterm examination. So you have to look at previous lecture where I always mentioning three boxes that always useful for examining foreign policy decision making process. Okay, let me see at these three boxes here. That the first is external factors. This is a very significant, very important factors behind foreign policy decision making. So, what kind of behavior in specific countries like Indonesia or other countries today, of course, uh, being influenced by external factors. What kind of external factors here we can uh, understand this through this today's lecture. So uh, today we will specify our topics on how uh, international environment influence foreign policy decision making. Okay, the objective of foreign policy is to respond international strategic environment, which is a international system, or we call it as how uh, international political contestation influence foreign policy decision making or influence countries' behavior. So this is according to Kaplan. But traditionally, international system uh, maybe defining or connecting uh, with the contestation among major powers. So how major powers behavior, this is will traditionally influence state behavior, even until domestic politics. This is very important in internationalism. So that is why uh, study of international relations is very important for us, is to understand how international environment, international politics influence domestic politics. So this is the key point. The key point here that international environment is very significant, influencing foreign policy decision making. Okay, according to Shipping Tang, this kind of international environment uh, usually link to the what we call as polarity. So by understanding polarity, we can understanding how the global politics, the international politics works. So what kind of polarity now in the world is kind of a very significant factor. If we understand what types or what kind of current uh, polarity in the world, we can understand how our foreign policy making process. uh, according to Zhang, that this, if we can understand polarity, we can more easier to understand uh, the mapping of global world. So if you can understand polarity, you can easily to understand how the current global politics. So for Tang's, polarity defining as concentration among major powers. So polarity basically belong to how major powers connect each other. This is a very key point here, that if if we understand what kind of polarity, we can easily understand how the competition among major powers. So polarity means how the competition among major powers, depending on how many major powers there are many. I think a specific definition that major powers, the groups of major powers is reflecting polarity system. So refer to the mainstream theories in IR, that uh, international environment strategies is always defining into three aspects at least. There is what we call is balance of power. If there is any competition among major powers, mean there exists what we call is balance of power. And then liberalism have, there is any interdependence. Okay, and for constructivists, why uh, the relationship among major powers is because there is any connectivity of identity. So realism uh, see polarity based on power struggle. For liberalism, perceiving polarity is interdependence. But for constructivism, polarity means difference identity. Okay. For Tang, polarity is very significant in determining uh, international politics, whether in a global manner or uh, regional situation. So the polarity is very influence on the global politics as well as regional politics. Okay, the influence of major powers in specific region, of course, depending on to what extent the interests of major powers on specific region. Uh, More higher interest of great powers, major powers, in particular areas, of course, the pressure will higher. If the interest of major powers in a specific region is lower, of course, the pressure is also lower. Okay, from this scenario, we can understand that why specific countries behave like this. Of course, this is because of the level of the pressure from international. If a state freely to behave, means that of course the level of pressure is lower. If the state behavior is constraining, I think this is very connected with the lower level of the higher level of international pressure, or from a major power pressure. So here we can defining what kind of level of the pressure using what we call is relative power position. So which position our countries in international system is we can examine using uh, relative power position, or posisi kekuatan relatif. Okay, this is the formula if we want to understand uh, where our country's position. This is a simple illustration. The mathematical formula. I think this we already understand this. Why I put it as favorable. This is favorable, unfavorable, unfavorable. So if y is domestic factors, x is systemic. If the systemic is plus, means favorable, means the international pressure is lower. If minus, means that international pressure is higher. This is very important to us. A leader in the countries also have a dilemma, because uh, must face at least two situations. One is international, two is domestic politics. So we can put it as if the domestic politics is maybe under pressure, maybe ahead of election, or maybe favorable because government program is successfully implemented. So we we can assess the position of the countries. Okay, let's see. If maybe in the current situation, we will we going on COVID-19 uh, war. I think the international pressure also higher, because we uh, push by international community to uh, fight against coronavirus. But in domestic politics also, we facing serious problems. There is a minimum budget and so on and so forth. So sometimes the leaders tend to be rhetoric in the position. So if international pressure is high, domestic pressure is high. So the position of the country's foreign policy is here. Sometimes no action, or just in rhetoric only. Okay, this is the basic understanding. So we can discuss further in the discussion session. Okay, for Tans added that the current situation is he called as global unipolarity, means there is a single major powers, uh, namely United States, but uh, there are also merging great powers such as China, Russia, France and maybe Korea or North Korea. So that's why William Wolford call it as okay. Maybe U.S. is major powers, but they can refuse the U.S. Uh, maybe U.S. dictate in specific issues. So maybe U.S. of course still major powers, but there are also many great powers. And I think I call it also as not global unipolarity, but uni multipolarity. Uni means one, polarity is polar. So uh, this is the example of some argument that sometimes U.S. is want to bring the current situation into bipolar. Bipolar is just two great powers, two major powers, like in Cold War era. So in 9/11, for instance, George W. Bush said uh, those countries did not follow U.S. in global war on terrorism, charged by U.S. as a state of evil or negara setan ya. So this is the pressure from each power. So many countries at the times follow or maybe accept the U.S. pressure. Uh, all countries should campaigning global war on terrorism. Okay, so a global war on terrorism used by United States to interpret to defining whether you are my friend or you are my enemy. But at the same times, uh, they don't care about poverty, unemployment, undevelopment, ethnic conflicts, which is a very dangerous compared to global war on terrorism. And this is more politics, I think, and poverty, unemployment, underdevelopment is very critical compared to global war on terrorism. Okay, this just means that the country's foreign policy is influenced by international environment. So, uh, in the countries, usually they assess if the position of our country is like this, they should like this, they should do like this. So the most important thing is, of course, we they always refer to the concept of realist, that everything should be national interest first. This is key point of realism. Okay, this is the illustration how we can understand the era of global environment. So in 1990s, I think the situation is multipolar because of the many major powers there. And then after uh, World War II, there is a bipolar between US and Soviet Union. And then after the Cold War, there is unipolar. You have US dominance, but merging some powers. So, okay, this is the illustration I taken from Farid Zakaria illustration to defining illustration of multipolarity, the evolution of geopolitical continent. Okay, this is multipolar. Multipolar means many major powers. We can see it in during, I think, World War I, World War II. There are many great powers like Great Britain, France, Belgium, Serbia, Russia, Japan, Montenegro, and many more. I think you have already understand the multipolarity at the times because of many great powers, and No, uh, I think so, because the power is also balanced. Okay, this is multipolar. And later on, after the Cold War, we entered on what we call is bipolar. Just two, just two major powers. We, uh, one is United States, and two is Soviet Union. And this is why easy to understand because they differentiate by two very uh, contradiction ideology. One is Soviet Union using communism ideology, and United States using capitalism. Both is compete each other throughout the world during the Cold War. Okay, the next is uni multipolar. This is I think uh, after the Cold War ended. So still, United States is number one in the world, but they are also merged some major powers, at least in the region. Like India is major power in South Asia, China maybe in East Asia and Asia Pacific, and United States in maybe in Western Hemisphere, European United States is very significant. But in Europe also exists some significant or important powers like France, Germany, Italy, Turkey. In the Middle East is very complex situation. So still, US is number one in the world, but there are many competitors that not easy to handle by the US. So this is okay. We can see here that in terms of maybe collective powers, US still number one, but in terms of largest military in the world, in terms of military troops, I think China is number one based on this statistic. Okay, this is the current situation in the world. How the U.S. is still maintaining in its Asia Pacific vis-a-vis China, because U.S. have a huge power outside U.S. through the deployment of the troops in some military bases, like in South Korea, Japan, Guam, and some maybe limited partnership like in Vietnam, Thailand, Singapore, and already posted marine base in Darwin, Australia, which is just 100 kilometers from border of Indonesia. This is very significant, and this is how U.S. want to check Chinese expansion in South Asia also. You can see here that the red color is China, and US already exist in the Middle East and even in Indian Ocean, Pacific Ocean, Pacific area. Of course, US already exists, but in Indian Ocean and in the Middle East, US still powerful. But China is uh, going to race to balance against the US. Okay, maybe the current situation is more dominant. The rivalry between United States and People's Republic of China. But I think we should understand more what kind of the competition is, because uh, Russia, Turkey, uh, Germany is also very important uh, actors also in the current situation. So I think we can discuss it in the further session. Thank you very much, and thank you again for your watching this video. So see you again in the next episode. See you. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.